welcome to Munich, where we are outside the Munich Security Conference on Saturday of the conference, where we've had, I think it's fair to say, an eventful couple of days. We had a speech from J.D. Vance and a speech from Zelensky talking about the future of Europe, about war in Europe and European politics to a degree that conferences like this don't always see. And here at Rivada, we're holding this event in part to talk about security in the context of the raft of cable cuts that we've seen throughout the world, many of which seem to be state-sponsored or at least state-endorsed, and what that means for the resilience of international communications. I'm Brian Carney. On my right is Declan Ganley, and Andreas Lindenthal is on my left. And we are here to have a special edition of Watch This Space. So Declan, why don't you kick us off with some thoughts about the conference and about the global security situation?
So, well, I think this conference will go down certainly as a memorable one. I think you have to go all the way back to when Vladimir Putin spoke here many years ago. In hindsight, I think it's clear that that speech that he delivered at the Munich Security Conference all those years ago was a resetting of the relationship between the Russian Federation and the West. People maybe didn't fully appreciate it or understand it at the time, but if you look back at the events that happened after that Munich Security Conference compared to those that were happening before it, I think that it's a mark, a very sort of clear mark in history of what came next. And I think that Vice President Vance's speech yesterday, while it has been undeniably controversial and has caused all sorts of reactions from enormous upset and criticism to adulation, it's the culmination of a macro message, to get away from the specific details. But there has been a message that has been coming from the United States for a long time. President Obama delivered it in a different way. But the message has been, Europe, you need to step up. You can't rely on the American taxpayer to keep paying for your security. And why should a taxpayer in Anchorage, Alaska, or Omaha, Nebraska, or Portland, Oregon, why should it be a priority for them? And of course, I can make the arguments why, but you need to convince them, not me. And so that message that was delivered from the Vice President here yesterday, remember that message was as much for a domestic audience in America, the people that voted and gave a mandate to the Trump administration, as it was for the people sitting in that room. And it's the same message on a macro level that we've been getting for 20 years. And it's a bit like, when I was a kid, my mum might have had to tell me more than once or twice I had to clean my room. And at each particular time of being reminded, the decibels raised, and after a while it got kinetic. It might have ended up with a clip across the ear before I realized I actually did have to clean my room. And so and not to make light of what he said, obviously what he said was very serious, but the message is clear. Europe needs to step up. America is pivoting to the Pacific. Again, Obama said that. He said it very clearly. That message is clear. There is a clear and present threat in the Pacific to democracy and democracies. Europe is not going to be able to head off a threat in the Pacific. It can't. So the active democracy that can do that, and that has the budgets and the wherewithal and the power to do that, is the United States of America and its allies in the Pacific: Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, so on and so forth. So we're seeing a reshaping of priorities. The priority of America has to be the Pacific. and the priority of Europe should be Europe. And yes, I don't think the Americans are going away, but there is going to be a rebalancing of the burden, and this is, we're sitting here, and for the first time in my lifetime, we have a land war in Europe where we have a Far Eastern army engaged in combat. That hasn't happened since the 13th century.
Yeah. Well, Andreas, I suspect you may have a slightly different perspective on the goings on the last couple of days, and do you have thoughts or reactions to Declan? Don't be shy. He can take it.
No, not really a different view on that. Maybe some aspects of what we have seen yesterday, particularly, and today. So first of all, I think it's very rare in the political arena that you are getting a wake-up call twice. That's, I would say, it's the positive part. Because in 2017, when Trump took over the office, first time, everybody in Europe, in Germany, was saying, wow, this should be now a wake-up call. We were talking about US leaving NATO, returning the troops from Europe to the United States and all that. It did not happen, fortunately. But after a huge shock period, everybody in Europe, including Germany, was going back into a comfortable position and said,
right.
Okay, not that bad. And since then, nothing happened. Despite the war, which we have seen, everybody was talking about maybe more defense activities, but even when talking about defense expenses and budgets, 6 months ago in Germany, you could not find anybody who would be prepared to spend more than 2%. The discussion was always, there's the obligation of 2%. Should we be able to achieve that, yes or no? Meanwhile, we are talking about 3% minimum, 3.5% maybe, because it's needed. And I think this is now the second wake-up call, which, of course, with the amplification in the speech yesterday by J.D. Vance, has been understood, at least now. So we will have to see how this is propagating into the next weeks and in the next future, and into the real, let's say, actions. So therefore, I think it's positive. Now Europe, Germany would be able to take that wake-up call as serious as it is needed. Certainly the disappointing and embarrassing part was that the Vice President was also mentioning something concerning political parties. So we are close to the federal elections in Germany.
Right.
And certainly that was disappointing, that was annoying, seeing that without expressing any preference, for the political parties, but now using the opportunity of such a meeting, which is the biggest security-related political meeting in the world, in Germany, to promote a party which is proven to be a party which is, let's say, using Nazi propaganda and taking positions, should not happen. And that's certainly something which is now, I think, demonstrating to people that we are deviating from values from which we thought they would become.
Right. And I mean, one of the things I think that illustrates is just the complexity of getting involved in detail in any other country's politics. You don't always know either the sensitivities or the precise history, or you inevitably kind of step in it, I suppose, when a leading politician from one country starts expressing views on
Absolutely.
the parties of another.
And to be honest, there have been, of course, also German politicians in the recent weeks and months who gave some recommendations concerning the elections in the United States, in Austria. So if it is now coming back,
right,
you should not be surprised.
Definitely
by that.
plenty of strong opinions about the American elections to go around in Europe, for sure.
Absolutely.
JD
On
Vance.
the other side, what I see, and you always have to take positive parts out of such a crisis situation. What I see, we have now seen speeches from the Minister for Defense, Mr. Pistorius, from the Chancellor, from Friedrich Merz, and what you see is there is now a commonality of positions, that they are taking a relatively strong position, which goes, let's say, in defending our democracy, defending our principles, our values, which are common also between the different parties, as I said, except the extreme right party. But I think this brings probably now, let's say, a discussion, hopefully now in the last days before the election, let's say more common sense and focus on the key topics into the discussion, which are how to protect our democracy, how to make sure that we are getting to a government which may change, but which still follows the same value which we always had in Germany.
Right. I mean, to me, one of the takeaways from Vance's speech for me was that if you don't confront the real issues that the world presents you with, they have a way of, confronting you instead, right? And whether that's migration, which is an issue he talked about, or, one of the issues that Declan mentioned that I want to talk about, which is the threat in the Pacific and the threat to our, communication systems and networks, and the threat that poses to all of our securities. Because in the modern world, in modern warfare, information is key. Gone are the days when, you could relay orders, in person, right, on horseback or in a Jeep or whatever. We send tactical information, strategic information through electronic communication systems and telecommunications infrastructure. And it seems to me that at least some countries in the world have internalized this in a profound way and are actively looking at how they can affect the outcome of kinetic war through telecommunications infrastructure attacks, right? That communications is an extension of war by other means, or something. I probably have that backwards, right? But it has become central to how we fight and how we respond to threats. And the first 15 minutes of the next big war, God forbid, but history suggests there will be one someday, will probably involve attacks on communications infrastructure. You think that's fair, Declan?
I think it's always been fair in the past. If you look at any major conflict that's a peer or near peer conflict, the first thing that is people go after is the lines of communication and supply, and data is the most vital supply line and information line. It's both things in a modern environment. It's what keeps our economies going in peacetime, and that of course is what Rivada is focused on, is providing a robust economic solution in peacetime. But even in what we call peacetime, there's this grey zone that has developed, and it is a grey zone of warfare, and that you are seeing cyber warfare. The cyber war is on. It's hot. It's happening right now, and there are more protagonists in it than just Russia and Ukraine. This is a full-on, very, very intense conflict that is already being waged in the cyber domain, and sides are maneuvering to be able to position as best they can and take advantage of their position from a cyber perspective. The arteries of the internet, which is where the cyber domain travels and exists, the arteries are the subsea cables. The subsea cables, and there's only, and this is, people are shocked when they hear this, on the whole planet, there are less than 550 subsea cables, less. So between built and planned, the number is just approaching 550 now. That's it. Those are the arteries. And if you cut those less than 550 arteries, there's no internet. This stuff will not work. And we are seeing in the last few months and over the last year, very manifest actions being taken to cut subsea cables.
Certainly seems like somebody's practicing for how to do this efficiently and effectively.
Right.
I mean, it's no accident, right?
And you could be sure that what's going on is, so they drag an anchor, they cut a cable, and then they're watching how long does it take them to repair it, what ship gets sent, who calls who emails who, how long does it take that person for them to get from their house or their apartment to the port to get on the ship? Do they go on a ship or do they go on a helicopter? All of that stuff is being mapped.
Right.
How many cable cuts can you do at the same time where you overwhelm the ability to be able to respond?
Right. What is the kind of the global capacity for
Right.
doing this, and the response times? How much time does it buy you? How does that escalate as the number of cuts escalate? Right. All of that is being empirically tested in front of our eyes, and yet it still feels like a thing that maybe we're not in the West taking entirely seriously.
There's no maybe about it, Brian. There's absolutely no maybe about it. It is categorically, people have their heads in the sand. There's some newspaper articles about it. It creates a bit of a kerfuffle for a couple of days for people who have nerdy interest in this stuff. Some politicians say some things, and a week later it's forgotten about because no one's cut cables in the last 3 or 4 days. And this will happen at some point, whether it's this year, next year, in 10 years from now, in 40 years from now. Save this. This will happen. They're going to get cut. They're going to take down the internet. Someone's going to do it. A state actor may do it. A non-state actor may do it. It's too easy. And it's not even obvious who will have done it. Nord Stream. You can look at all the theories on the internet about who did Nord Stream. I mean, that was a freaking big pipeline, gas pipeline. These are not as big as Nord Stream. That got done in whenever it got done, and nobody knows for sure who did it. These cable cuts of these subsea cables, too easy, will happen, will definitely happen at some point, and there's not going to be an internet. At which point, and this is where I'm going to talk my own book here,
All right.
the outernet will be the only thing that can keep global communications up and running. You'll be able to have your shortwave radio like you would have had 50 years ago or whatever, but in terms of moving data, the outernet, for as long as it takes to re-establish internet connectivity, the outernet will be the only thing that will be able. Now, will the outernet be able to carry all of the world's
That was my question.
internet traffic? No.
Tiny fraction, right?
No, a fraction of it. But the most important stuff, the vital stuff that we need to keep the most fundamental parts and services of our economies running, and to be able to operate national security systems, the outernet will be able to do that.
I certainly hope so. Do you want to throw it open to the floor?
Sure.
Do we have questions from the audience? Yes.
Yeah, if you allow, I would like to amend exactly for that, because yesterday was the biggest side event of the Munich Security Conference is a space night, so with 500 visitors, and it was quite illustrative in terms of the visitors to the panel. And there was,
Anna has the mic.
and there was a General Trout. General Trout is General Traut is the head of the German Space Command, and he gave a quite interesting, some quite interesting statements. And he's fully aware that if the German armed forces are buying services from private companies, for example the Autonet or others, because they are working quite a lot with space companies currently, he said we are fully aware that we need to protect them. Who protects these companies? And this is really about the assets on ground and in space. They are thinking exactly about that. It's not that they place maybe a contract to us buying services. They really think further, especially for what-if scenarios. What did it mean? And securing the space asset is on their agenda. They really dive deep into that, how to do that. Because of course there are physical assets in space. Although we are quite resilient. And this is what I think will also come from the US Navy. So if you have such kind of customers on board, they do the homework and do not want to rely on us. They speak with us about how to increase security needs and how to protect such kind of infrastructure for this kind of events. So space and defense, and this was maybe the takeaway also for me, is growing together. And please remind the Andreas Kubilius, the commissioner from the EU, is the first EU commissioner for space and defense. So they are tying now the things together, and I think it's the right point in time to also expand defense into space. And General Traut, one of his first statements yesterday was, the war is already there in space. It's already there.
It certainly is.
I'm sorry, sir, did you have a question? No, I'm good. This was Clemens Kaiser, our program officer, speechifying from the floor, off camera, just for the audience watching at home.
Clemens says something, I'd like to say something.
Ronald, please.
Sure, because we're very focused here on what's going on currently in the world, and some states potentially being at each other. In that context, it's important to realize that this is the space industry, right? And the space industry has always been a global industry. East-West tensions have always been there in this industry, right? When this industry started out in the 70s, China was not a player, Russia was still the Soviet Union. We saw Nixon go to China and China got on board. We saw Yeltsin get drunk with Clinton and Russia got on board. They had launches and everything. So Putin took a 90-degree turn. China went their own ways, and in some shape or form, years from now, that will be different again. I mean, elections are out there. Elections are won. Elections are lost. So we talk about this as a very unique point in time, and to an extent it maybe is, because every moment in time in itself, per definition, is unique. But this industry is very well equipped to deal with that. And one thing will stay through all these tensions, and that we've seen throughout the history, and one thing will be more and more important, and that is the need for data sovereignty. That will always stay. And it is here where what we do here is so important, because we have the tools to do that. Whether it's an enterprise or whether it's a government, at any one time, people want to know, where is my data? And being able to say that, when it's in transport, the Autonet is the only network that can actually do that. Because everything else that you buy from anyone else is a myriad of patch networks in which you never know where stuff is, to say it in a proper shape or form. That will always stay. And with that, the tensions between East-West, if they are even there, is really not a factor. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Ronald. That's Ronald van der Breggen, Chief Commercial Officer, former guest on Watch This Space. Maybe a guest again someday. Okay, I think we'll leave it there unless either of you have a closing thought to share. If not, I think we can call it a
Thank
day.
you, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you, Andreas. Thank you, Declan. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Watch This Space, I hope.